interim manager David White, as well as our previous manager Jordan Clark. So I just want to acknowledge that they're both on the line. So I'll just give a brief background, brief overview for those tuning in and for the benefit of the council members, committee members. So as part of the Shattuck reconfiguration pedestrian safety project, the 2-block western segment of Shattuck Avenue will have two-way traffic, which is now the case, and the eastern segment, Shattuck Avenue East, will have one-way traffic heading north. So rather than have two Shattuck Avenues, one side of the street will remain Shattuck Avenue, and the other side of the same street, which is the eastern leg of Shattuck Avenue, currently known as Shattuck Square on one block, and Berkeley Square on the other block, would be converted to the name Shattuck Avenue on the west side, and a new street name on the east side. And I have some visuals in a moment that I'll share with you. But I just want to briefly, let you all know that the goal of this street renaming project was to reduce confusion for first responders, customers, residents, visitors, transportation service providers, meal delivery services, and courier service agencies. And this effort will also simplify and standardize the street names and addresses in downtown Berkeley, and add an opportunity to reinvent this street in this section of downtown Berkeley. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now if I have the ability to do so. And I will. Seconds. All right. Is the presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right. So the existing conditions that we have now are, this is the top of the screen is facing west, basically. And so as you see now, we have Shattuck Avenue West, which has been converted to two-way traffic, and that project is nearly complete. You have the 2 blocks named Berkeley Square and Shattuck Square, and we also have Shattuck Avenue East, which is now the one-way section heading north on Shattuck Avenue. That goes in front of the current hotel development. And so with this project, the street names with the proposed renaming project would convert all the addresses and parcels in yellow to Shattuck Avenue, and then the parcels that are in teal and blue would adopt a new street name that we're hoping that this committee would recommend to the City Council for adoption. So once again, the new street name would be the eastern leg of Shattuck Avenue, and where you see Shattuck Avenue would be the name for all of those western-facing parcels that are on those 2 blocks, Berkeley Square and Shattuck Square. Once again, I just reiterate that this really provides an opportunity to rebrand the street and section of downtown Berkeley, as well as generate excitement and optimism, and honor an individual, a place, a culture, a movement that typically isn't recognized. So just to go over some of the naming criteria, the city will consider proposals for street naming, but is under no obligation to accept a proposal to that name, or to rename the street, or assign a ceremonial name to the street. Street names should portray a strong positive image and have historical, cultural, geographical, or social significance, or contributions to the community, the city, the state, or the country. Continuing, increased emphasis will be on street names that honor or represent segments of Berkeley population that have traditionally been marginalized or overlooked. The street name should not be or perceived to be discriminatory or derogatory of race, color, ethnic origin, gender identity or expression, sex, sexual orientation, creed, political affiliation, disability, or other social factors. The street name shall not result in inappropriate abbreviation or be similar sounding to an existing street name or facility name for that matter. So just to go over some of the process for those who aren't aware, we followed the City of Berkeley's policy for naming and renaming public facilities, which is an action that can be enacted or initiated by the city manager. And we held open and transparent public outreach involving anyone that was interested in participating. We held public meetings and forums. We did online polls, We at Berkeley Considers, we started a social media hashtag Rename Shattuck. We relied on elected officials' newsletters, youth engagement, email, news article comments, stakeholder group meetings, and the public renaming idea. And just to give you a sense, kind of going backwards, we were under some pressure to move this project along fairly quickly due to the fact that the project, the Shattuck reconfiguration project, was nearing completion, and as you can see, it's almost finished. So we were operating on a pretty rapid timeline. So just to give you some of the background and some of the examples of the engagement, our local Berkeley Cub Scout Pack 30 held a meeting where they discussed civic engagement and getting involved with local politics, and they all met and determined their recommended names on behalf of the pack. And some of those names, you'll see if you had a chance to look at the submittals, were very timely, like Old Town Road and things that were contemporary at that time. So you can see like Joyce's Old Town Road. So it was just fun and whimsical, and it got a chance for the youth to be involved. And so we also relied on our Shattuck Avenue idea wall, is what we called it, which was a huge chalkboard on Shattuck Avenue and between, actually right on the north end of Shattuck near University, where people were free to pick up some chalk and write down their ideas. And we recorded all those names and incorporated them into the submissions that were considered. And so we wiped the board clean every week. We took pictures, we documented, we transcribed what we could understand, and we took those under consideration. And so it was fun. It was a cool kind of public meeting place where people would just chit chat and share ideas. And there were times where I was out there basically holding office hours and just talking to people and getting their feedback and encouraging them to write down their names. And so as the Shattuck reconfiguration project was going on, many of the construction workers and folks who were out there working actually went and participated and wrote down their submissions as well. So there's timing on the left and who submitted time to straight. So there were other ways people could submit names. We had little cards made up where people could write down what they thought should be the appropriate street name on a makeshift street sign. And here are the project milestones that I just want to briefly go over just to give you a sense of where we were and where we met. And so we had our public kickoff meeting at Edge Grill right on site. We did the open call for names. We held our NAC committee meeting, which is our naming advisory committee, which is listed in the packet. We held our public works committee meeting February 6th. We're now at the vice committee meeting, and we hope to take this to the city council as soon as we're able to get on the agenda, because it is very timely. And this graph just gives you a sense of how people participated and how they submitted their names. And as you can see, there was an overwhelming amount of names that were submitted on, like, just using chalk on a crowdsourced piece of equipment that was posted up on a fence with the support of the DDA as well, and that property owner. So these are the recommendations. After all those names were submitted, the naming advisory committee was tasked with coming up with 10 names forward to the public works committee, and the ones that are in gray were the names that received unanimous support from the NAC. The ones that aren't in gray received like a split vote, but still got votes. And I added a couple asterisks there just so folks would see that some of these names aren't necessarily consistent with our naming criteria because they're either an existing part of an existing street name, or sounds like another name, or maybe another facility or park or something like that in Berkeley. So those were taken under consideration, but those were the results of the NAC. And that's the naming advisory committee. So on to the Public Works Committee. Their task was to finalize those to 5 names, if possible. They came up with 6. And these were the top unanimous Public Works Commission names: Kala Bagai, Maggie G, Ohlone, or another indigenous name identified after consultation with the Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area and other indigenous peoples, William Byron Rumford, Anna Saylor, and Sita Vinreddy. And so We also held a Berkeley Considers poll. As you can see there, there were two top vote getters after 1,251 votes, and that was Kala Bagai with 37.3% and Aloni with 41.8%. So once again, just to recap, this is the existing conditions. You have Shattuck Avenue West, Shattuck Avenue East, Berkeley Square, and Shattuck Square, which would then be converted to Shattuck Avenue and the new street name. And one of the reasons we're really excited about this project was because it didn't really take anything away. It didn't remove a name that was associated with a person or a place or a movement. You know, you had Shattuck Square and Berkeley Square, and I grew up in Berkeley. I have a hard time remembering which is which, and so I just think that this is a great opportunity to reduce confusion and really reimagine this new street that is almost complete. I received a lot of financial obligations from the city. So that concludes my report, and just to reiterate what the staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution renaming these two blocks to one of the 6 names that the Public Works Commission submitted, and to forward this to the City Council for their final adoption. And that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. So I guess we'll bring it back to council, and then we'll go to public comment. Do you have any comments, council member?
Absolutely. I thank you so much for the presentation, Karen. It's been really incredible to watch this process roll out. You might recall a former roommate of mine actually was on the NAC for you. If you remember Amir Wright, who since graduated from Cal, is off doing his thing. So I get those updates organically, and it's humbling to me realize just how much work goes into an undertaking like this. Yeah, I think to a layperson, renaming a street might seem like one of the more trivial things the city could do, and that is so far from the truth. There's so many perspectives you need to take in, and you're right. Even this situation is so much easier than so many when you're taking really a blank slate and deciding what to draw on, which is a huge opportunity. There's been some incredible names being thrown around. I'll say I was always pretty partial to avocado toast way, and I know we made some headlines in early February, which feels like a lifetime and a half ago before the world imploded. And that was the Berkeley headline for the week, which was nice. But I've been tracking all the inputs, the engagement over the last several months, and I'm really grateful for the process that has led to this moment with this committee actually having sort of an inventory of options to work with, and really a choice to make, having been vetting hundreds of names, sifting down to a small handful that have a unanimous recommendation, going through the poll, seeing that there's really 2 that have really distinguished community support and investment. And of those, I think from everything I've been reading, I really have the sense that to me we're down to one name that is truly a unique opportunity and is getting what really feels like a beautiful consensus from our community, and an opportunity to do something different and new. And that's to rename the stretch Kala Bagai Way. We've been getting such an influx of letters, of communications from activists, from residents who are so moved by this individual story. And I've also been particularly moved to see spokespeople from the Aloni tribe weighing in, actually speaking in support of this name as well. And I know we've talked about this at our full council meetings just in the past few weeks. There's a lot of work ongoing in other spaces and on other blocks to further recognize the Aloni land that we occupy today. So from everything I've been hearing, to me, there's a clear choice right now, and I suspect that's probably what we'll be hearing in the public comment section. But I'm so grateful for all the work that's gone into this process. We've clearly reduced from an immense scale of beautiful ideas being thrown around to what feels like a good direction. I think this city will be really happy with.
Thank you, Councilmember. So I guess we'll go to public comment. So there's 3 hands raised. If you need to raise your hand, *9 if you're on the phone. Raise your hand for public comment, and we'll start with
you so much. So last night we had a really historic moment in Berkeley, and I'm really grateful to both of you for pushing us to do better as a city. And I think today we're here for a different kind of historic moment, and hopefully one that is easier to make. Thank you, Councilmember Robinson, for your initial comments and support. And thank you to staff for the process that they created, that we participated enthusiastically and in good faith. Thank you especially, Kiran, for being really accessible and answering questions. So Kala Bagai Way has received at least 150 letters of support this round. We have sent you the letter from Karina Gould of the Lejan Oloni tribe, the spokesperson and tribal chair, a very moving letter in support of Kala Bagai Way. And we've had public historians like Bay yesterday, Shaping SF, and API HIP, and the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, among some of the groups that have supported this. And we're here today to ask that you recommend Kala Bagai Way for the renaming of Shattuck Avenue East. And we're also asking that you recommend interpretive signage so that when we put up her name on the street sign, people can learn her story. So there are lots of people who wanted to speak on this, but we know you've been up until 3 a.m. last night. So we are trying to limit who will be speaking, and I will get to those names for you to call on. But here are the folks who are available to speak if you have questions. So we have parents like Zach, who helped make the Byron Rumford sculpture happen. Maureen, who works a couple of blocks from that street and is also a parent. We have Cal students like Ruby. We have Donna Graves, who's a historian who can speak to the issues of the interpretive signage. We have Dr. Michelle Magalam, who's the ED of the Asian and Pacific Islander Americans in Historic Preservation, who have also submitted a letter of support. We have Professor Palu Bakrania, who's the current chair of the College of Ethnic Studies at SF State. We have Anirban Chatterjee, who can speak to how Kala Bagai's experience wasn't unique, but is part of a larger story of anti-Asian housing discrimination in Berkeley. And it wasn't isolated white racists, but in fact city council members who were advising community members on how to keep out the Orientals. Excuse me for using that term. Here's who you're going to hear from. Rani Bagai is on the line. She's Kala Bagai's granddaughter. She's calling in from Seattle. Her husband and daughter are also here to witness this moment. We have Nirvan, who's a local middle school student who's here to speak. Dr. Manisha Bajaj, who's a professor of education at USF and also a Berkeley parent. We also have Swati Rayasam, who's a co-organizer of this campaign from the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action. Karina was really hoping to be here. She had a conflict, and we're hoping if she shows up during public comment, that you please do call on her. Thank you so much, and please recommend Kala Bagai Way today, and refer this to the City Council's consent calendar. Thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you so much. So next person is Ronnie. You're muted. Please unmute yourself, Ronnie. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you, council members. My name is Rani Bagai. My grandmother, Kala Bagai, tried to make Berkeley her home a century ago, only to be driven out because of her race. And my family and I have been touched to see the Kala Bagai Way street name with so much support from hundreds of residents, unanimous endorsements throughout the process. I was particularly moved by the support from Karina Gould and the Ohlone community, and I would especially thank them. So when Kala and her husband Vaishno Bagai arrived in 1915, I know the Bay Area must have seemed galaxies from the world she left behind, and she felt lonely at first, but gradually started making friends, making San Francisco their home. But you can imagine her shock when they bought a home in Berkeley, only to be physically barred from moving in by racist neighbors. That's when she made a hard decision. She told her husband that she didn't want to live someplace where her neighbors could hurt her children. The Bagais stayed on in the Bay Area, and Vaishno became naturalized. But 2 years later, just when they were starting to feel comfortable, federal anti-immigrant policies nullified her husband's citizenship, as well as other naturalized Indians. And this drove him into depression and later suicide. But Kala Bagai refused to be defined by these losses. She put her three sons, including my father, through college. She married again, reinvented herself, night school, learned tennis. She finally became naturalized herself. Her kitchen table became a community hub and a place of inclusion and welcome and sanctuary. She organized with other immigrants, supporting newcomers, hosting Indian American cultural events, building bridges between their communities, so other newcomers could have the kind of welcome that had been denied to her. Berkeley residents may have pushed Kala Bagai out of her own home, but naming a street after her would feel like a homecoming. Not only for Kala, but for us, her family, and descendants. It would redress the hurt she felt at being pushed out, but also honor her for the positive force she became for her community. Thank you all for considering Kala Bagai Way.
Thank you, and it's really an honor to have you here today. Thank you, and it's unfortunate that she had to deal with the racism that occurred, but hopefully we'll do the right thing. All right, the next person is Nirvan. You're unmuted.
Disclaimer first, I don't actually live in Berkeley, so I'm just living in Albany. But yeah, I'm kind of local, just as a disclaimer.
That's good. All good.
So, dear City Council members, my name is Nirvan. I'm 12 years old now. I'm here to ask that you recommend the east side of Shattuck Avenue be named after Kala Bagai. My father moved to the United States from Bombay in 1998, but Kala Bagai arrived in the Bay Area over 100 years ago. Growing up, I never learned that I had a long history in the country. Well, until recently, of course. Our textbooks don't talk about it, and my teachers sure don't. They just don't know the story. When it comes to the names of our streets, they just didn't appear out of thin air. Someone chose them to be named after specific people in specific times. Our community includes immigrants, women, and Asian Americans. You just don't see their names on streets, ever. You can choose to make our street names diverse, representing our entire community. If we name a street after Kala Bagai, it sends a message to everyone that families like mine are part of the history of the Bay Area, and that we have a place here, and though we have a long way to go, we have also come an incredibly long way in addressing racism in the Bay Area. Please, I just beg you, please consider naming the east side of Shattuck Avenue after Kala Bagai. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next we have Swati. You're muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks so much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Swati Ryasam. I'm a recent Cal graduate and have been a Berkeley resident for almost 5 years in Kate Harrison's district. I'm also speaking as a co-coordinator for ASATA, the Alliance of South Asians Taking Action, which is a 20-year-old progressive South Asian organization founded right here in Berkeley. We strongly support renaming Shattuck Avenue East to Kala Bagai Way and keeping the other names on your short list for use for other renaming projects around Berkeley. And we also request that if you choose to recommend Kala Bagai Way or any of these names, that it be accompanied by a requirement for interpretive signage. Most of Berkeley's streets are named after either white residents, abstract places, or ideas. And because of this lack of public display, you'd never know that Berkeley is a city that's 40% people of color, half of whom are Asian American. It's for this reason that we encourage you to recommend Kala Bagai Way and include all other names of people of color like Maggie G, Byron Rumford, and Sita Bemeretti on this short list. And given the considerable support and positive public engagement in this process, it should be easy for you to recommend this to council. We also urge you to recommend the name Kala Bagai Way in its entirety. Kala is an incredibly popular name, and choosing to recommend only her first name would erase Kala Bagai's personhood, render the street name as abstract, and divorce the name of its import and history. Choosing to only name the street as Bagai Way would as well erase Kala's identity, as the life, work, and death of her husband, Vaishno Das Bagai, is better known. For example, he was solely featured in the PBS series Asian Americans. Honoring Kala Bagai means moving her full name forward completely, and again with signage. In a city that prides itself on its social justice legacy, and in the midst of both a viral pandemic and nationwide unrest, you have in front of you an opportunity to make a meaningful commitment to positive change. This is a rare opportunity to own up to part of our history and to highlight an Asian American woman, a woman of color, and someone who wished to make Berkeley her home. in a very public part of downtown where residents, visitors, and students can feel empowered and seen by her story of resilience. We can't wait years, maybe decades, for the next opportunity to name a street after a woman of color. Thank you for considering our comments, and again, we urge you to recommend Kala Bagai Way to Council and help make Berkeley history. I will be submitting written versions of these comments and my comments to Public Works for your reference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next person, Terry, go ahead. You're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Terry Toplin here, Vice Chair of the Education Commission, who's the Justice Commissioner. I much echo the previous speakers, and I hope that you choose Author Kala Bagai. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Next person is Monisha. You're muted. You're unmuted. There you go.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Manisha Bajaj, and I'm a professor of education at the University of San Francisco. I'm also a parent of a 6-year-old and a Berkeley resident. I'm in District 2 with Councilmember Davila. I'm here to urge you to vote for Kala Bagai Way to be Berkeley's newest street. 1 in 5 Berkeley residents is Asian American, and we've had a long history that is vibrant in the city. We've had South Asian anti-colonial struggles that took root here. We've had many elders across the city who survived Japanese internment camps. A family that founded the iconic Berkeley Bowl. Despite Asian American contributions to it, we wouldn't know it from the names of our streets, our schools, our parks, and our buildings. Lack of Asian American representation was a glaring omission. There was literally a 40-year gap when there wasn't a single Asian American person on city council. Not till last year when council members Robinson and Kesawani were elected. The current naming process is a chance to begin to rectify this gap in representation and choose someone who wanted to live in Berkeley but who was forced elsewhere because of xenophobia and racism, Kala Bagai. It was Berkeley's big loss that her engagement as a leader contributed to other communities she lived in. I was so touched by Ronnie's comment about her kitchen table being a community center, and I wish we could have had that here in Berkeley as she brought people together. Kala Bagai Way would follow on the heels of thoughtful efforts in alignment with our social justice values as a community to rename schools, with Sylvia Mendez, and now with the new effort to rename schools that are coming up. When I talked to my son, who's 6, about Kala Bagai, who she was, what she endured, it sparked a really nuanced conversation about history, about exclusion, about bullying, and the need to constantly work towards greater equity and justice. As an educator and as a parent, I want all children to know the names and histories of people like Kala Bagai, whose life was shaped, for better or for worse, by her experience in Berkeley. For me, Kala Bagai is exactly the right person for us to honor right now. She was an Asian American, a woman, an immigrant, and a member of a minority faith. She represents critical parts of our community who have been deeply underrepresented in the naming of our streets. This is an opportunity to fill some of these gaps. I can't wait to overhear the rich conversations that will be sparked each time a child walking in downtown Berkeley asks their parent, who was Kala Bagai? A new street name is a unique opportunity to recognize past injustices and stand up for what we believe in. It's time to bring Kala Bagai back home to Berkeley. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Next person, we have Kelly Hammergren. You're ready to go. Go for it. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you. You know, when I first looked at the agenda, I wasn't really going to speak on this, and I decided that I really didn't keep it. After listening to the discussion, I think this is a terrific idea. I really support it. And I think we should really look at renaming other streets. Because it does send an important message. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Next we have Michelle. You're ready to go.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Michelle McGowan, actually dialing all the way from Washington, D.C. And I'm Executive Director and President of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans in Historic Preservation, API HIP, shorter. And on a national level, less than 8% of the National Register of Historic Places are associated with African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, Latinx, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, women, and those in the LGBTQ community. So API HIP, we seek to elevate local efforts to document, preserve, and protect historical sites and cultural resources that tell the stories of Asian and Pacific Islander Americans. Kala Bagai's contributions in Berkeley through the naming of the street is one step forward to recognize our diverse histories in California as a nation. We support the efforts by Berkeley's community members for Kala Bagai Way, particularly for this selected section of Shattuck Avenue, as it's located near a significant clustering of South Asian businesses that have been dwindling, which may compensate these changes. While choosing the name Kala Bagai Way in downtown Berkeley, it would actually help fill a large gap. To the best of our knowledge, City of Berkeley has little to no landmarks, monuments, or markers recognizing the historical and cultural contributions of APIs. Furthermore, there are no listings on the National Register associated with South Asian Americans. While some localities choose to designate only particular buildings or districts, Berkeley's model of naming a small downtown street would be an effective way of giving a nod to a wider citywide history without limiting recognition to only a single particular site or structure. While many of our members focus on site-specific preservation, we know that API people's stories are not limited to individual sites, and citywide recognition through street signage and designation can be effective in making these lives visible. So we strongly support the efforts of Berkeley's community members to designate a Kala Bagai Way. Naming the street would be one step forward to recognizing our diverse histories in California and as a nation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for calling in from DC. Thank you so much. And next we have Karina Gould. Thank you for being here. You're muted. There you go.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I just wanted to reiterate a letter that I sent in on March 2nd, 2020. The Confederated Villages of LaShawn support the name change of Kala Bagai Way. We have worked continuously with the City of Berkeley to ensure that the work of the LaShawn tribe is being uplifted. We, as the original stewards of the land, that includes Huchin or the City of Berkeley, recognize that other people have come to our territory and have done great work. We believe that at this time that it was important to uplift Kala Bagai in putting her name on the street. We have had wonderful opportunities to work with the City of Berkeley by having the name signage changed as we're entering the City of Berkeley to say Ohlone Territory. The beautiful signage that has been put on the street recently. We appreciate all of the work. And at this time, we are looking forward to you making the decision of uplifting Kala Bagai's life and work, and that we can continue to enjoy the many inhabitants of our territories. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next we have Lucy. You're muted. There you go.
Hi, City Council members. My name is Ricky. I just graduated from Kala Bagai Way. And I wanted to say, when students go to UC Berkeley, most of them enter our campus and our city knowing about its rich history of activism. And I was one of those students. I was so excited to become a part of this community, but I found myself struggling in spaces where the involvement of South Asian folks seemed to be such a novel thing. And it wasn't until 3 years into my undergraduate education that I learned that there had been South Asian women who looked like me and walked on the streets I still walk on today and made important contributions to the immigrant history of not just Berkeley, but the entire United States. I think it shouldn't take students so long to learn about someone like Kala Bagai and to feel represented in the history of the city. When I was reaching out to other students at Cal about the naming of the street, I got responses that contained so much excitement at the thought of identifying with someone who would concretely become a part of the city of Berkeley and not just be a name that we read about on niche websites dedicated to immigrant voices. So naming a street after Kala Bagai will send a message to Berkeley's South Asian student population and the student population as a whole that our activism and our political involvement is not a new and radical concept, but has long been a part of our community. And that was what I wanted all of you to consider. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Question for the speaker.
Yes.
Ruthie, did we meet on College Avenue
We
a
did.
couple months ago?
Yes, when I was taking grad photos.
Yeah, like the day campus shut down.
Yes, exactly that day.
Good to see you again. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, thanks, Rigel.
Okay, we have one more phone. Oh, you're muted. Thank you. There you go.
Hi, I am a professor professor of race and resistance studies, which is one of the 5 departments in the College of Ethnic Studies at SFSU. And I just wanted to reiterate the impact of this renaming for young people. Right, ethnic studies has foregrounded the importance of education that fully represents the histories, knowledge, and creative work of Indigenous and people of color. And the impact of such an education can't be understated. Right? The power of such representation has led to statistically higher retention and graduation rates for disadvantaged youth. So much so that the CSU system is now moving towards an ethnic studies requirement across what is the nation's largest public university. I see this move to rename the city street after Kala Bagai very much aligned with the goal and spirit of ethnic studies. Right, the Bay Area has been a crucial site for the formation of South Asian American communities, as many people have spoken to. Yet most historical accounts start with the early 1900s with the immigration of primarily young male Sikh laborers. Having a city named after Kala Bagai prompts young people to not only learn about this history, but to broaden its scope, especially in thinking about questions like gender. Crucially, then, renaming the street is not simply a representational move, but a pedagogical move. Right? Doing so will also enable young people to feel a greater sense of belonging at a time when racist exclusionism has dominated the national discourse. The story will also help empower youth to fight for social justice, which, as we all know, is a struggle we need now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Armando.
Hi, it's Armando Davila. I believe there's a just transition resolution ahead of y'all.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah. That's okay. Thank you. And Maureen? Hi.
Well, so far everyone has spoken in favor of Kala Bagai. I just wanted to add my voice to that. I'm a Berkeley resident and a relatively recent immigrant. I've lived in Berkeley for about 10 years now, and I'm Indian, of Indian origin, and my son is half Indian. He's 6 years old, and my daughter is 3 years old. And I think, as other parents before me have said, it really would make a difference to have a street name that I could identify with and I could tell my child stories about. And as a resident of a city that prides itself in its inclusivity, I think we should also take the opportunity to acknowledge the times when we haven't been able to do that. And really, as Rani Bagai said, welcoming Kala Bagai back into Berkeley would be a beautiful way of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So she was the last hand raised. One more hand. Russell? You're muted. Go ahead. Unmute yourself, please. There you go.
All right. Thank you, council members. It's Steve Finnicum, actually. It's my computer that's pretending to be Russell. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
So I served on the Naming Advisory Committee, and this has been a moving process and very interesting to listen today. I do want to ask you to consider including the name of Anna Saylor on the recommendations to council. So Anna Saylor was the first statewide elected official from Berkeley. She was one of the first 4 women elected to state legislature. Suffrage for women winning the vote nationwide occurred 100 years ago. So if we didn't have other things preoccupying us like COVID, we would be celebrating that now. Anna Saylor was a major progressive in Berkeley history who's almost entirely forgotten. Her focus was on community service and juvenile justice reform. A lot of the things she said and acted on as a legislator would be incredibly familiar to the struggles that people are still going through today. And after she was elected by the people of Berkeley and served in the legislature, she was also the first woman who was appointed to head a state agency in California. So I didn't know any of this until this naming process started and she was nominated. And she's still almost completely forgotten, which is a shame because Berkeley has so many women elected officials, including our state representatives. And so I want to encourage you to keep her name in the process as it goes forward to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more, Anirban.
Yeah, hey there. I'm one of the tour guides at the Berkeley Sound Vision Radical History Walking Tour, and for me and for many others, I've been doing a lot of research on the history of anti-Asian housing discrimination in Berkeley. I just want to point out that Kala Bagai was an incredibly important South Asian women activist on the West Coast, and she could have done her work here, like many of the people that we love and respect, if she were allowed to stay. And she wasn't the only one who was pushed out. I mean, there's a long history of different Asian communities that have been pushed out. I'm thinking, for example, in the 1930s, the Berkeley Realty Board was working to encourage racial covenants. And in spite of that, residents were warning that Orientals and colored people, for terms, that there's a chance they might be able to move into this area between Grove and Sacramento, Dwight and University. And in response, city council people actually advised residents to try to establish 100% covenant coverage to keep the Orientals and colored people out. In the 1910s, the school board were pushing back against Hindu, which is the term they use for all South Asian people. The students coming to Berkeley High. In 1907, in West Berkeley, neighbors were calling on the police to get 3 or 4 households of both coolies and Hindus out of town and trying to get the police to sort of use them as a way to sort of like racially cleanse that neighborhood. In 1922, council was asking staff to find ways to prevent the sale of 1932 base to Japanese folks. In the 1930s, property owners in the Elmwood were protesting a Hindu temple at Piedmont and Dwight, and the architect had to go up in front of city council and promise that there will be no, quote, Oriental architecture and no Orientals will even attend this. That's how you prove that you're a good Berkeley. And there's a long history of this. It's just a tiny bit of it. And out of recognition for the fact that out of something like 500 different Berkeley street names, there's, as far as we know, not a single Asian American. We'd like to we'd like to encourage you to recommend only one name at this point in time of Kala Bagai, and really have that historical moment of the very first Asian American street name in Berkeley to do that hard historical reckoning work, and also to honor the kind of amazing activist that she was. Unfortunately, not her best years were left in Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that historical content. So that was our last hand, so we'll take it back to the council. I am thankful for all the testimony today. Thank you for being here, and it's actually shameful that she was forced out of Berkeley, and unfortunately those covenants are still in place. I would like to make a positive recommendation for Kala Bagai, and I would like to make a motion to accept that as the recommendation to the city council. So that's my motion.
Second.
Okay. And then, do you want to do the roll call?
Before we do, I have a question or two that it might be helpful to poke staff with. That if it's relevant, we might add a thing or two to the motion. If I could, before we take a vote.
Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I'll note first. Thank you to everyone that's called in. I love this stuff. There's such a significance to the names, the places, streets have in our community. I know it's much less compelling than any of the historical figures, but I found the old Station Place really interesting. The history of the K line running around that little block of Shattuck. And just a couple weeks ago, I was sifting through. I'd been made aware of some really unfortunate writings of Mr. Bancroft, the man who Bancroft Library is named after. And someone was suggesting that it might be interesting if we looked at renaming Bancroft Bancroft Way, which shares that name. And then we dug a little deeper and found out that Bancroft Way had existed long before Mr. Bancroft, as in the Bancroft Library, is actually not a connection. Just two totally unrelated old white dudes. And just the profound whiteness of our streets in every city, really, just continues to baffle you. You're familiar with Francis Kittredge Shattuck, the immense landowner downtown who's involved in all sorts of things. The fact that we have both a Kittredge and a Shattuck street, picking apart multiple parts of his name, where we can't find room to recognize the contributions of any Asian Americans in our city, that says something, that I'm glad we're making that move today. I had a couple questions, and this reflective of some of the asks from the public commenters, and Karen, maybe you can help us out here. Is there a short list of names or anything like it that's pivoted to when renaming processes are happening? I mean, is there something that would be productive to include in the motion to ensure that all the feedback that's been generated about all these other names that we may not pick up today, but there's clearly community interest in seeing represented somehow? Is there a way to see those kind of reflected in future renaming processes?
Yeah, Councilmember Robinson, you bring up a very good point. It's something that I should have mentioned, that through this process, because we don't do this very often.
Right.
I'm old enough to remember when we renamed Grove Street to Martin Luther King Jr. Way, and how much interest that generated.
Really, I wouldn't have guessed.
But, the awesome thing about this project and this approach to all the outreach that we did is we do have an awesome list now to refer to if we want to, entertain renaming community centers, streets, sections of a park, a bench, any of those things. You guys can, the city council can refer to this list, and whether it be the short list that the Public Works Commission provided, or the names that the NAC provided, or just the entire list. I think it serves as a resource for at least the next couple of years for you all to rely on and say, hey, we do this process, it meets the criteria, and if we're considering renaming some, like you say, another part of the city, whether there's either redundancy or there's a Miracle Street name that doesn't carry much weight to it, that we could revisit this. And I also just want to take this opportunity to really thank the members of the NAC for their time and their effort and their thoughtfulness when they reviewed these, because it was not an easy task to whittle down 1,000 submissions, 900 submissions all the way down to 10. So I do want to thank that committee and reiterate your point that yes, these can be, this list can be retained and used.
Real glad to hear that. Well, that'll be good. I think it's probably not necessary to include that in the motion then, but I like what I'm hearing. The second piece was about were some comments about interpretive signage. I was wondering if you could speak to what sort of signage we might expect, what interpretive signage really means, if that's something that would cost significantly more to do, if it's important that that be a part of the motion, or if doing something like that is part of the plan anyway.
I think it would be worthy to add that in the motion, so that staff can look for funding opportunities, whether it be through an artistic approach, where it's an artistic style signage that could maybe utilize some of the art funding that we have, or if it's something that future development would have to contribute, or if it's funding that we could identify through grants. So I think that's definitely a novel approach, and there's different examples of interpretive signage that we have around the city. There's the Berkeley Historical Plaque process. There's the sign that's actually in front of the background that's behind me that talks about the key system, and it's kind of a 45-degree angle tilted interpretive sign. So there's different style signs that we can look at, but some funding would have to be identified. But I think through the motion, it could show the intent that the city wants to see this, and we could work with some of our partners to contribute.
How much of those, if you don't mind me asking, how much of those interpretive signs?
Unfortunately, I don't have a quote on the top of my head, Councilmember Davila, but we could definitely get a quote for what a typical signage, whether it's a plaque or a freestanding sign, would cost. And we can do that research.
And maybe, I'm not sure if it makes sense to fold it into the resolution itself, but maybe alongside the resolution, we could also make as part of the motion a referral to the city manager to develop a plan for interpretive signage and pursue funding opportunities for it somehow. Yes, something like that. I think that'd be great. Cool. Cheryl, you like the sound of that?
Sounds fine.
Alright, there we go.
Alright, so that's a motion, I guess I'll second.
Or you modify your motion.
I made the motion actually.
Right.
That was the
I'll offer it as a friendly
my
amendment.
motion.
There we go.
So you'll second.
Seconded.
Alright. So, I don't know how that works. Anyway, I guess we did that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's correct. And for clarification, is that a positive recommendation?
Yes, it's a positive recommendation.
Okay. So
only one of my thumbs shows up when I do that.
I was curious as to, you wanted to add that other name on the list? Because I don't really want to add it to this, but I just want to make sure that name is on the list.
I think it's important that we only submit one name to the city council.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm asking the question if the name that he was requesting is on the list of the names so that we have it.
It is, yeah. That was one of the other 5 that I think the NAC unanimously approved for consideration.
I don't have it in front of me right now. So okay, great. Thank you. So I guess we need to just do a vote.
Okay, so we have a positive recommendation to send the item back to City Council with a recommendation to rename Shattuck Avenue East as Kala Bagai and a referral to the city manager to develop a plan for interpretive signage and explore funding options to do so. Councilmember Davila?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrison is absent, and Councilmember Robinson.
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all for all the commenters. And now we'll just move to the item number 3, topic circle.
Thank you all I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to the participants. Thanks to all the participants who've been diligently following this process and emailing and making their suggestions and showing up to the meetings. You all, I learned a lot through this process as well. This is very educational and entertaining. So thank you all.
Appreciate you, Karen.
Yeah, you might have a lot more work on that because I understand that there's quite a few streets that people are thinking about renaming because of the climate that we're in currently.
Send that to Fareed. No.
Berkeley might be one of them.